Hello, this is John from Western Maine Defensive Tactics. Today we're going to talk about something that might seem a little strange. I'm going to talk about what I learned about Bowie knives from my Estwing hammer. Now, some of you might be wondering, that's kind of weird. What do hammers have to do with Bowie knives? More than you might think. Now, to me, this Estwing hammer is a thing of beauty. It's functional art in your hand. And I think so because, well, about 15 years ago, I was working on my house/camp, and I bought this hammer because I was disappointed with the quality of the hammers that we'd been using. And one day I was up on the second floor putting in second floor joists and using this hammer, and everything was going very, very smoothly. The hammer was working with me really well, and the job went really quickly. And I came to realize something that I've actually known for many years, growing up on the farm working with tools, that when a tool is well designed and well executed, it works with you. It lets you concentrate on the job you're doing and not on the tool itself. When a tool is not well designed, or it's less than ideal, it draws attention to itself because it has different aspects about it that annoy you or make the job more difficult. A really well designed tool is elegant and works with you very well, makes the job much easier. And to some of you, I'm stating the obvious because you've worked with tools before, but a side effect of the technological advances of our society are we use hand tools less and less, we appreciate them less and less, so your average homeowner that gets a hammer from the hardware store has fairly low expectations of what a hammer should do. And through that process of end users having lower expectations, manufacturers give us a little less, and over time the tool devolves into something that is barely functional. But before I talk about that too much, let's talk about this Estwing hammer and what makes it so good. Now, this is an Estwing framing hammer. It's designed to hammer spikes and nails, and to that end, probably about 70% of the weight is concentrated right up here in the business end, right in the head. But let's look at the different dimensions of it. In this dimension, you have a nice smooth transition into the shaft. No stress risers, no 90-degree angles, no undercuts, no weakness at all. Very well done. The same is true in this dimension. You have a nice taper in both dimensions to transfer that mass into the shaft. The shaft itself is about 1/4 inch thick at the median rib. It's tapered in either direction, both to reduce weight and to give you a splitting edge for shingles and things. Shaft continues down into the transition to where it goes into the handle. That's also very well done. No sharp edges, no big 90-degree cuts or anything like that. No stress risers, and it's like that in both dimensions, of course. Into the handle is excellent. The handle in both dimensions has a nice wedge in this dimension and a nice wedge here, because this is a heavy pounding tool. You need to pound spikes with it, and so it's going to have a lot of action like this, which will make centrifugal force try to take that tool out of your hand. That wedge in both dimensions locks that tool into your hand. Now, the handle material is a synthetic, but in this tool I'm willing to overlook that. I'm not a big fan of synthetics, but this is a pretty good tool, so the synthetic complements it well. And, by the way, look at this. Would you say this is a narrow tang or a full tang construction? Looks like narrow tang to me. Now, let's talk about the heat treatment and the steel. The steel in this is a 1050, 1055 type of this, which is commonly used for hammers and things like that. Excellent choice. Heat treatment. Heat treatment on this tool is spot on. Estwing hammers aren't known for spalling or for breaking or any of that kind of stuff. You can hammer all day and the heads don't chip unless you do something stupid with it. Now, they're hard enough to hammer nails, heat treated well enough where they don't bend like a wet noodle when you hammer with them. The claws don't bend, but neither do they break when you pry with them. It's not too hard, it's not too soft. It's just right. It's perfect. The heat treatment on this is well done. Now, from a knife perspective, let's talk about fit and finish. Now, Estwings are pretty much delivered with say a 250 grit finish with a coat of lacquer over them, and that's perfectly adequate for a working tool. Now, bear in mind, you could have a custom or specialized version or a special edition Estwing hammer that's completely mirror polished and has every nook and cranny completely finished to the finest degree. But what purpose would that serve in a working hammer? all it would do is serve to raise the price, because that takes a lot of time in hand finishing. And as far as fit, well, this isn't the kind of tool you sit around in your easy chair looking at how the manufacturer left a grinder mark here, or this edge isn't completely straight. This isn't that kind of tool. This is the kind of tool you put in your tool belt, or throw in the hammer loop of your Carhartt, throw it in your tool bucket, and you go to work with it. You go build something you want, or it helps you make a living, that sort of thing. Now, my point is, the Estwing hammer has it where it counts. It's not highly polished, it's not finely finished, but the steel is excellent. The design is excellent. The heat treatment is excellent. And, in my opinion, if you haven't got that knocked down in a knife, if you don't have those aspects taken care of in a knife, spending a lot of time on spit and polish, fine finishes, and excellent fitting is kind of a waste of time. Now, by saying this, don't think I'm trying to excuse shoddy craftsmanship or half-ass work on knives. I'm not. In my opinion, when you get, say, a mid or upper level Bowie knife, the craftsman should deliver you a nice, cleanly finished knife. Let's say a 400 grit or 600 grit hand finished, hand sanded, or you can do it by machine, whichever. But a nice, clean finish. No tool marks or grinder marks or things like that. Every aspect finished and cleaned up. No filing and stuff like that. But a clean finish. Not necessarily a mirror finish. Not necessarily a perfect mirror finish. But a nice clean finish. And then you as the end user go out through use and put the dings and the scuffs and the character on it. But he should deliver you a clean slate to do that with, I guess, so to speak. The guard shouldn't have huge gaps in it. No file marks on the guard. No little crescent cuts in it where he drilled the slot out. Things like that. Guard shouldn't have any big dings in it. And granted, if there is a little scratch or something like that on the blade, as long as it's not a big nasty 50 grit scratch in the middle of a 600 grit finish, it's not going to hurt you. It's a working tool. But at the same time, the craftsman should be conscientious enough to know, hey, I'm not going to say, hey, I'm not going to put out a product that is otherwise fine with this big nasty scratch in the middle of it because I take pride in my work. That sort of thing. But it should be appropriate for a working tool. Now, all that said, there are people out there, and I don't think that I'm telling you that I'm one of them, because I'm not, that will make you a perfect Bowie knife. The heat treatment, the overall design, the edge geometry, all that is perfect. It's solid, spot on where it should be. And, in addition, the mirror finish is perfect. The fit of the guard is perfect. The handle design and execution is perfect. There are people out there that will do that for you. I'm working towards that goal, but I'm not there yet. I'm not satisfied with what I can do yet. Now, bear in mind that when you have that level of perfection in a knife, you're taking it out of the realm of what your average knife user can afford to use as a working tool. Now, there are those that will take a $2,000 Bowie knife, put it in their waistband, and go out and go to work with it. And I say more power to those people, because it keeps knife makers honest. And frankly, if you're going to have a really nice tool, something that's has evolved beyond the ordinary, if the only way you can really appreciate the work that the maker put into it is by using it, but you have to use it intelligently so you don't use it. And I can understand the hesitation at taking a knife with a very fine mirror finish and going out and beating through brush with it. I mean, I wouldn't do that either. I would use one of my knives that doesn't have a mirror finish on it. But we talked a little bit about the de-evolution of tools, and that happens with all tools. It happens with axes, with knives, with pitchforks, with everything. And if you look at some of the older tools, there's an elegance there that I think in a lot of ways that we have lost. Pitchforks, for example. You get a modern pitchfork off a feed store shelf or at a hardware store, and it is a minimally functional tool. Find a pitchfork from, the 1920s or something like that, back in the era where people were still putting up large amounts of loose hay, and they are completely different tools. They feel very different in your hand. The older pitchfork many times has an elegance and a durability that's beyond the modern pitchfork. The modern pitchfork is often chunky and heavy and clunky. Sure, you can still fork hay with it, but it is a far cry from the older pitchfork, because those tools were designed to do a job long term, be worked hard year after year, and work with the user. And the people that were making them at the time understood that, because they had often done that work themselves. And While the tool may be lighter, it is not weaker in any stretch of the imagination because the heat treatment is often spot on. Modern tools often have extra material because, especially with cheaper tools, it's a lesser material. It's a lesser quality steel, so they make it up with what I call railroad engineering. And railroad engineering isn't necessarily a bad thing, it just sometimes it is. Now, the Estwing hammer isn't railroad engineered. They have excellent steel, excellent heat treatment. They don't need to railroad engineer it. They don't need to make this a big, thick, half-inch shaft to support that hammerhead because they chose the steel intelligently and they heat treated it intelligently. So they don't need to make that up with just general mass. But I hope that gives you a little bit more insight into well-designed tools, not just knives, but tools in general, because knives are just a hand tool, and they need to be made appropriate to what their function is. And again, I'm not trying to excuse shoddy craftsmanship on anybody's part. I won't put up with it. I won't tolerate it in my own world, with my own work. But at the same time, I also say, hey, we need to keep a reasonable cap on prices and time involved with the knife, because if this is a real knife, what I consider I look at it like you have somebody that has a high dollar 1911 that costs $3,000 and they're very proud of it, but it stays in the gun safe. That's where it lives. It lives in the gun safe. He takes it in the in a rug or in the box to the range, and he shoots it and enjoys it that way. But it gets clean, goes back in the box, goes back in the gun safe. Vice the Glock that he carries every day. Sure, the Glock isn't as pretty. It's more rudimentary. It's it's more of a layman's tool, that sort of thing. But it's functional. It's an everyday thing, and it's a lot less expensive. You don't cry when you drop your Glock in a stream, or you don't worry about the finish getting worn from going in and out of the holster. Same thing with a working knife. I like to have a Glock mentality when it comes to my blades, because these are working tools to me. They're not things of objects to art, because I don't make art knives. I don't make pretty knives. I like to make solid, functional knives, and I'm working on the process of getting them, cosmetically perfect. I'll never get there because that's just not my nature. I'm not an artist. I like to make solid tools. But anyway, I've prattled on long enough about this subject, so just take that in mind. And next time you pick up a hammer or like a hatchet or something that is a working tool, just look at the design a little bit and appreciate it for what it is. And you'll start to learn that a lot of times the older tools that got used harder were a little bit better than what we have. And this is true of axes and shovels and all sorts of things. But I hope you got a kick out of this video. I will see you later. Bye.